Please put together a warm Old Westbury round of applause for our distinction.
Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to, yes, almost afternoon. I'd like to thank Dr. Archer and Dean Sucru and Old Westbury for this wonderful invitation to return to Westbury. I was here this summer and had the privilege of working with some teachers and sharing some stories with teachers. And I've shared some of those things that I shared with that small group today, but many things have happened since then. And so we're going to share with you some of the things that have happened since the summer and tell you the totality of the story, even as up to as recent as yesterday, right? So my name is Benito Mountain, and people often ask me about my name, right? Where did you get that name from, right? My mother named me after Benito Mussolini, Italian dictator. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But that is where the name came from. His name was Benito Andrea Mussolini. And he was a school teacher, actually. But they hanged him, so it's not. But anyway, I want to share with you the story of the Hip Hop Literacy Laboratory because it really is about unleashing the power of words. If you walk into my classroom at Alcova Elementary, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta, you'll find several old typewriters. You'll find images of the work of Jean-Michel Basquiat. You'll find images of boom boxes and all types of things, cassette tapes. And what I'm trying to get young people to see when they walk into my classroom is that it's not just about reading passages and reading books. It's about the power of words, whether those words are on a cassette tape or on a vinyl record or coming out of a boom box or being typed by Du Bois in 1903 on an old typewriter at Clark Atlanta University or Atlanta University at the time. It's about how do we leverage the power of our words and our ideas. And that is what I am there to do with those 10-year-olds. I'm not there to help them score their highest score on a test. And that is the force that I try to push back against in public education right now. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about literature, we'll talk about history, and we'll talk quite a bit about art. Because art is a big part of what I do, that art being visual arts like this, making sure I collaborate with artists. This was drawn by Justin Bua. Also, musical artists and the art of hip hop and hip hop culture. So let's take a little journey. This is me when I was a kid. You know, my mom and dad were both educators. My mom taught elementary school, and my dad was a math professor at a local college. And I used to say, I want to dress like my dad when he goes to work. He would wear a shirt and tie every day. So there I was in fourth grade wearing a shirt and tie. Right? And in most of my classes, I was one of maybe two African Americans in the class. And I share this picture to share with you. I'm sitting next to my buddy Bobby Parker. A lot of the instruction we received, it did not connect with our culture and things we were interested in. And we made it through, but we saw a lot of our peers become very disengaged in school because what they were subjected to, what we were subjected to, just didn't really connect with us on the level that it did for the other folks in the classroom. Here we are on a field trip to the local Piggly Wiggly. You know, it was a small town and they did for us what they could, but in terms of exposure, the exposure that my students have access to, I didn't have that. Occasionally we would have people come to the classroom, eye doctors in this case, and there I am, you know, looking, I'm so interested in this because, you know, I'm trying to understand how do these glasses help me see better? How does this work? You know, I'm a young kid just trying to make sense of the world. And those were some of the most memorable times of my education experience. And I've tried to recreate those for my students. So along my journey, I've had a chance to do some amazing things. I spent some time in Washington State as an assistant principal at one of the most diverse schools in the nation. So you can see the diversity of these schools behind me. And I learned very much about the complexity of equity. It's a catchphrase now in education, equity. You hear it a lot, but it's a very complex thing to make all of these different students feel welcome, feel embraced, feel listened to, and loved in the classroom. When you're dealing with a curriculum that in many cases is inadequate. How many of you feel like the the school curriculum that you went through, whether it's elementary or middle school, do you think it really met your needs? Raise your hand if you think it really met my needs. I saw one hand go up and it went back down. Okay, how many people thought it could have been a little more rich and encompassing of diversity and different perspectives? Okay. Unfortunately, we're still in that place, very much still in that place. And so what I've tried to do is jazz up the curriculum. I've tried to bring a little bit of hip hop into the curriculum, jazz and art. I've tried to, Miles Davis has a great quote. He says, great musicians play the notes that aren't there. Great musicians play the notes that aren't there. And I think so many of our educators use the classroom as a space to do exactly as they are told. And you can do that, but you also need to be conscious of trying to play the notes that aren't there. And that's what you see hip hop artists do. We call it freestyle. You're improvising. You're filling in the spaces in the beat. And that's what jazz musicians do as well. And I think educators can borrow from that world quite a bit. So I think this is America's down south white tent revival, and I'm here for it. So let me tell you what that means. I wrote this article a few years back for Citizen Ed, and when I was a kid living in Swainsboro, Georgia, I would go over to the window because I would hear these noises at night. It's 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, and we lived across the street from a large park. And I'm like, what is all this noise? It sounds like a band. It sounds like a second line. What it was in the park. It was a huge white tent. You could see lights inside the tent. You saw these cars parked on the park, and they were having a revival, old down south revival, and it would go on well into the night. And there was music, there were people devoting their life to God, giving their life to God and changing how they were going to move forward. And I think education needs that. We need that moment where we kind of just break from the past and say, tomorrow is a new day. And too much of what we see in education harkens back to old systems that have traditionally done a disservice to many communities. So this is where the Hip Hop Literacy Lab steps in. What I noticed as a principal, and even as an assistant principal, is that a lot of the instruction that I was seeing in classrooms was not culturally relevant. Resources didn't reflect the diversity of the kids that were walking down our hallways. And a lot of the resources perpetuated misinformation about underrepresented groups, particularly when it came to things like Christopher Columbus. I mean, that's a big thing that we still have not told our students the truth about how this country came about. And so even now, there's a lot of political pressure to not tell those stories. Folks are afraid to even unpack those things. So what we did was we created a classroom in an elementary school to help students to embrace the power of hip hop culture, to embrace the power of literature, but also to develop a critical consciousness. Be able to look at your community and your world and say, what is the system doing to my community? And are the institutions in my community addressing our needs? That's a tough question. I think we should do that as adults as well. What are the institutions doing, or what is the system doing to my community? When I say the system, I could be talking about the mass incarceration system. I could be talking about the educational system. I could be talking about the food system, the food deserts that exist in many communities, so that people aren't able to really stay as healthy as they need to be. You see hip hop everywhere, but unfortunately you don't see it as much in K-12 where I work. Currently I work at an elementary school, in the suburb of Atlanta, but schools have been slow to embrace the power of hip hop. And I understand partly because a lot of hip hop carries a very negative connotation because of the language, because of the misogyny, because of some of the negative talk about drug dealing, things like that. But I tell you this, I was walking in a grocery store. They have Publix here. They have Publix, Kroger. What do you have here?
Stop and Shop.
Stop and Shop, okay. I describe hip hop to many people who are outside of my generation or don't connect with hip hop who are in my generation. It's like a grocery store. There are aisles that they're very healthy things, right? You go and you know that. And there's a potato chip aisle. And then there's the wine aisle. And there's ice cream aisle. we don't condemn the whole store. But we know that if we go down certain aisles, there are certain things that are not that great for us. You have to look at hip hop music in the same way. You have to look at it in the same way. That's the analogy I use to help people not condemn the whole thing because portions of it aren't that great. So what we know about hip hop is that it is the most streamed music. Look at this. Education is big on data, and the data says, hey, this is what people are listening to. And so when we look at the music that's the favorite type of music among Black Americans, look at the data. You know, I love Kirk Franklin and Al Green as much as the next man, but I also love a little Nas and Jay-Z and J. Cole, and I can't say Jay-Z right now, let me pause on that. But I love all of these MCs I grew up with, KRS-One, and hip hop is a very popular music, even just within the Black community. Spotify, the most popular music genre, hip hop again. And so a lot of questions that I get from folks are, well, when you go to different schools and the population is not all African American, they're not into hip hop. Well, the data says hip hop transcends race. Hip hop is the most popular genre across all of these things, even internationally. When I talk to my friends who are hip hop artists, they still travel quite a bit. Yugoslavia, Ireland, Czech Republic, and they're actually in more demand overseas to perform this music in front of white audiences than they are in the States. So let's see what you know about hip hop. You guys know who Alex Trebek is? Yeah. Okay. Well, Alex Trebek had this great show called Jeopardy, right? And he would ask these questions. And so my question is, can anybody name the 5 pillars of hip hop? Anybody? Someone. What are the 5 pillars of hip hop? Individually, they comprise the 5 pillars of hip hop. Oh, we have someone. All right, so we have a contestant. Our contestant, I'm sorry, what's your name, ma'am?
Diana.
Diana, would you tell us the 5 pillars of hip hop?
I don't know all of them, but I'm just going to take a stab in the dark and say maybe breakdancing.
Breakdancing is one, yes. Give it up for Diana. Give it up.
Rap.
Rap is another one, yes.
Graffiti.
Graffiti is another one. You got 2 more. I'm sorry, you don't win the Toyota Camry. I'm sorry. You will not win. But she gave us 3 of them, and that's right. She said breakdancing, graffiti, and rap. There's 2 more. Anybody want to take a stab at the other 2? What's that? Entrepreneurism? No, not quite. That does show up on another list. Yeah, that does show. Yes, sir. DJing is the 4th one. We got 1 more. And it's the one that deals with Dean Sukram. It deals with what Dean Sukram does. These are the 5 pillars of hip hop. MCing, DJing, breakdance, graffiti, and knowledge. Now, KRS-One came up with a longer list that had about 9 elements of hip hop, and entrepreneurship was one of them. Street knowledge, street language, street culture. But these are the core pillars where things started from. The MCing, the oral piece, the DJing, the auditory piece, breakdancing, that movement piece. Kids love movement. You get them up out their seats, they love that. All right? Graffiti art. I have kids who, as I'm teaching, they're drawing. As I'm teaching, they're still listening, but they're drawing. And how many of you do that when you're trying to process something, you doodle a little bit? Okay. And then knowledge. The culture and the music was not only meant to just, hey, let's have a good time. The music was also meant to carry information. And we're going to talk about that as well. Who's this in this image right here? Who's this? On the right, on the far right. Amidst the book. So you know what that is?
KRS-One.
That is KRS-One. And what is his name, his nickname? He calls himself what? He calls himself the teacher. Blastmaster KRS-One, the teacher, because for KRS-One, it's all about conveying information. His name even means knowledge reigns supreme. KRS-One means knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. So what I saw, someone asked me today, hey, when did you start to think about integrating hip hop into education? When I went to graduate school and I started to look at the multiple intelligences, I said, you know what, this reminds me of hip hop. It reminds me of that because different ways that I can teach in my classroom speak to different students. And so I started to see the correlation between all these different elements of hip hop culture as I was learning about multiple intelligences. I said, I can take this hip hop culture and lay it on top of multiple intelligences, and I can actually reach more students so they're not disengaged like I was when I was in school. So this is a wonderful quote by Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, who also lives in Atlanta. It is our duty as educators to not just teach skills, but also teach students to know, validate, and celebrate who they are. That is a powerful quote because we can lose sight very easily of this second piece that she talks about, to know, validate, and celebrate who our students are. So this is a song from KRS-One. It's called You Must Learn. And in this song, he is actually critiquing the public school system. And so what I do with my students in the hip hop lab, I will go through the lyrics before I play the song, and I would say, hey, when you look at this, what is he saying? Why is he saying certain things? And the lines are numbered because we may take it in pieces, but I want you to look at what's here, and I want you to listen to him recite these lyrics.
Yo, Chris, what you doing out of school? Yo, man, they just suspended me, boo. Why they suspended the teacher? Yeah, man, I'm getting so sick of this, man. They teaching us about nothing, man. You know what the bottom line is for black people out here? It's quite simple. You must learn.
So, what is he saying? Anybody want to take a stab at what is KRS-One trying to say? Yes, sir.
He's saying that the school system basically, like the way they taught him, it didn't fit with his way of learning. He didn't learn it that way, so the teachers and whoever around him try to label him as rebellious because he didn't conform or subscribe to that way of thinking and learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Give it up for this young man. That was great. That was great. Because he wasn't learning in the same way that they expected him to learn, because he didn't agree with everything that he was being told, he was labeled as rebellious. And so many brilliant young men and women have left our school systems because they didn't feel valued. They felt like they were being labeled. The school didn't meet their needs. And many of them make decisions at a young age that impact the rest of their lives. And so that's one of the reasons I love being a teacher, because I try to heal those wounds that are in the system in a way of building relationships, making the learning more engaging and welcoming for all. But one of the things that stood out to me when I heard this song, the last two lines here, 12 and 13, you're trying to make me you by seasoning up my mind with C. Jane Run, C. John walking a hardcore New York. He's making an allusion to the books that were in my classrooms when I was a kid. See, we had these readers, and the teacher would call you over. You'd be the motorcycles, come on over. All right. Now I need the scooters, come on over. Now the skateboards, y'all come on over. And so you come over, you have your reading group, and you would have these Dick and Jane readers. And it was really based on white middle class values. You know, it was not really diverse. And these were pervasive in the 70s and 80s. And if you take a look at what's written here, the use of them eventually began to decline as people started to understand in the 80s and 90s the importance of culturally responsive teaching and the images. And from what I understand from reading your syllabus, visuals and images have so much power. And so educators started to become aware of this. And that's when we started to move away from the Dick and Jane readers, particularly in diverse communities where you want to see yourself. You want to see yourself represented. So as a principal, I would think back to what I saw in the library. This is what I saw. When I was taken to the library to go check out books, I would get me a Hardy Boy Mystery, give me a Berenstain Bears, Curious George, Dr. Seuss. After lunch, my teacher would read to us from Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls and Pa. And I'd sit there like this, waiting, waiting, waiting. I think I started biting my nails at that time, like just something to pass the time. But it had no connection to anything that I was interested in. So as a principal, I tried to make sure that the literature that was on the shelves of the libraries, that was on display in the classrooms, reflected the faces that I saw in those classrooms. So I sat with the media specialists and we would go through and we would order this literature that also spoke to some of the challenges my students were facing. Some of them were Muslim in the midst of classes that were not predominantly Muslim. So there were questions about what is that you're wearing on your hair, or why don't you do this or that, or why are you fasting? Why are you fasting? Other things didn't appear in the curriculum. So this unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre, that's not in the curriculum, but it's something that actually happened, and there are children's books about it. So again, what was that quote I said about Miles Davis? Play the notes that aren't there. Play the notes that aren't there. And so even in selecting books, this is a granular thing, but it has a big impact. The books that, because what do we say as teachers when they finish your work? I'm finished. All right, grab something to read. But you got to think, what do they have to read? And at home, do they have access to books like this in their library? So this is what my population at this school, Marbury Traditional School, started to look like. And my teachers were not prepared to engage those families and to have literature that let them know, we see you. I see you. And so we would have conversations with these students. We would have literature that spoke to those students' experiences. And we'd also integrate things like this in the Hip Hop Literacy Lab. And I'm so glad this image is here because the book that's in the center was edited by whom other than Nikki Giovanni, who we just lost. Nikki Giovanni had the foresight to understand that a book with poems by Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks could stand alongside A Tribe Called Quest and Queen Latifah. She got it. She understood it because she saw that this is all literature. And in the front of this book is a disc where the kids not only can read this literature in the book, but you can play it and they can hear it. Remember I talked about multiple intelligences? Nikki Giovanni was on it. And my thing is, this is the type of thing that should be pervasive in public education. It's not about teaching kids to rap. It's about exposing them to beautiful literature that can be enjoyed in so many different ways. So we had this room that we weren't using in my school. It was room 11. And room 11 was like the junk room. You have a broken chair. Principal Mountain, where should we put it? Room 11. You have a table with a wobbly leg. Where does it go? You had a whole bunch of old math materials that we don't use. The district has just spent thousands on new ones. Put these old ones in room 11. But I was really missing working directly with children. And so what I did was I created a space where I could go in and pull kids to teach. Because I noticed as I was giving teachers feedback, a lot of them weren't able to implement some of the things I was asking them to do. So what I wanted to do is the same thing we do for young people. I wanted to model. So I said, you know what? I want to create a classroom, but it's a classroom where we're going to try some things. We're going to try some things. And so we took this room and it became this room. And this became my laboratory where I would try out some new things. And we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that this is our laboratory where we are going to try to make learning fun, make it exciting, and step outside of these boxes. School doesn't have to be dry, right? So on the wall, what are some of the things you notice in that classroom? What are some of the things you notice? I don't want to just lead you, but what do you notice about the way this room is set up? Yes, sir. Okay, open, graffiti on the wall, artistic. She said it's bright. Tables are what?
Together, they're not separated.
Tables are together. Yes.
And like in a shape where like all of the kids talk.
Yes, it's communal. Yep. The seating is communal so that, you know, you're never going to struggle alone. Yes.
On the sidewalk.
Yes. Yes. If you don't know, now you know. Yes. The music stand, being sucrum? Yes. So you guys notice a lot of things that were intentional about how we set this classroom up, because you got to think some students are skilled at reading and some struggle. So you always want to have them where they can support each other, but everybody needs to be seen and heard. So it's kind of like the cipher. In hip hop, the cipher is very important. You know, there is no head of the table. You know, we're kind of all in a circle seeing each other. And you'll see this when folks are having a dance battle. You'll see this when people are having a cipher where they're rhyming. But what we also wanted to do was make a space where if you had something to share, you wrote something, you could come up and share it up front. So all of this was kind of based on this three-legged stool of the work of Gloria Ladson-Billings, first and foremost, culturally relevant pedagogy, the work of Geneva Gay and Goldie Muhammad being culturally responsive, and hip-hop-based education with Chris Emden and Dr. Edmund Ajapong. So it was kind of built on all of those three things. But these ladies, I call Dr. Ladson-Billings the notorious GLB, because everything I do is kind of an extension of her work and embodiment of her work. As a male elementary teacher, I think only about 3% of the elementary teachers in the country are males. There's a real shortage of representation of males at elementary school, particularly African-American males. But her focus was always looking at what's working. What are the teachers who are having success with students, what are they doing? Because there was a period when everybody was just looking at failure. There was a preoccupation with why are they failing? Why are they failing? As opposed to looking at why are they thriving? What are they doing? And let's take that and use it, right? And really it boils down to us as educators having a knowledge of our students and a knowledge of culture. Not just ours, your culture and someone else's culture, other people's culture. So take a look at this quote. I argue that the education of racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse students should connect in-school learning to out-of-school living, promote educational equity and excellence, create community among individuals from different cultural, social, and ethnic backgrounds, and develop students' agency, efficacy, and empowerment. So I want to skip some of these slides, but I got to stop here because Dr. Emden, who is at Columbia, has done great work in the vein of hip-hop ed and just making a larger spectrum of educators understand and appreciate how to integrate hip-hop into the curriculum. So I definitely got to give it up for him, Dr. Emden, who actually was on my dissertation committee as well. And so he's given me a lot of encouragement to continue this work. So I have the lab jacket on. We're going to walk into the hip-hop literacy lab. You ready to enter? Yes. All right. So here we go. In the hip-hop literacy lab, let me go back. I skipped a few slides. I'm going to back up and let's see. Give me one moment. We have a live hyperlink I want to show you. Can you hear that?
special guests were two rappers from the hit group Nappy Roots, a group known for their intellectual lyrics.
Make this record, it was about a week or two after 9/11, the World Trade Center situation. And hip hop at the time before that was cash money, a lot of materialism, a lot of bling, a lot of worrying about your cars and your rims and how much money you had. But when World Trade, the 9/11 happened, it brought everybody back down to one equal playing field. It was about family. It was about, even though times are hard, there's going to be a better day. I spoke about prayer ain't the only word. Hope is, having faith, thinking positive, and having a positive outlook on life. Even though you might come from a hard place, if you strive to try to get out of that place, there's nothing wrong with having positive thoughts and attitudes. And even though we were told it didn't matter no more, you wonder why we act this way, is because we know it's going to be okay. And the attitudes that we had back in the early 2000s, we didn't come from a good place. We all came from different walks of life. We all had parents, we all went to school, we looked up in college, so we were educated, and we knew that that was our way out with education. And so there's a lot of words in there, but we were showing all these prejudices. We didn't have a lot of dead prejudices, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had each other. And even though you might not have a lot of money, you have a lot. Health is good. Being healthy, having parents, having your family around you, having siblings that you be care for. They love you, you love them. Having that in your heart is what I was trying to say. And my son told me it's going to be okay. My son was 3, 4, but he knew at that time that I had some bad days in chasing my career. He was like, that's going to be all right. He's out.
So imagine the power of having, first of all, the students are studying author's purpose, right? And instead of just going through and picking some random passages, I had them read the lyrics of Nappy Roots, Po Folks. These guys wrote this when they were in college. And then I contacted Nappy Roots and they came to discuss their lyrics, and the kids had questions for them, and they were sitting right there with the artists that they had read. But we went a step further. Because in 5th grade, students are tasked with examining paired text. You have 2 passages to read. What are the similarities? What are the differences? We took the lyrics of Nappy Roots and put them alongside Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And we talked about writing about your plight, whether you're a young African-American in Kentucky or you're Maya Angelou talking about her situation when she wrote that poem. And now, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And it was just wonderful, and those guys were so honored. I guess I should talk through this. Those guys were so honored that we put their work alongside Maya Angelou, but the students were honored to sit there with Nappy Roots because they'd heard this song. They know Anthony Hamilton, and they've heard this song. And thankfully, those guys live right there in Atlanta and were gracious enough to come and help us. So my thing is this. Every community, particularly in New York, you have access to artists here who could come and support the schools, and they didn't perform. They didn't come and do a rap concert. They walked in this classroom and sat and had a discussion about, this is why I wrote this is why I wrote that, this is what I was going through. My son said this, I took that, put that in the rhyme. That's what I wanted them to have. I didn't want those guys coming there in a performance space, but more of an intellectual space of like, hey, I'm a writer. This is why I wrote this. This is what I was trying to convey. Do you guys have any questions for me? Right? It was great. It was great. And so I think if we do more of that and move away from the performative side of hip hop and really talk about what were you going through when you wrote that? What made you write that? And so here's another example, and this is Gangstar, which the name does not even reflect who these guys are. But the gentleman on your left is Keith Elam. And Keith Elam went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. And later, his father was a judge, but he came back to New York, lived in Brooklyn, and worked as a social worker. And he was working with the youth, trying to keep them on track, trying to keep them out of trouble. And he realized the power of hip hop, and he became a hip hop artist. But this is one of their early tracks. I want you to look at what he's saying here. For those folks who say, hey, I don't know about hip hop, I want you to hear what Keith Elam, also known as the guru. We talked about KRS-One, the teacher. Now we got Keith Elam, who's known as the guru. Do you see a common pattern in terms of how people are naming themselves based on what they're talking about? Now, when you hear that, knowing that he worked as a social worker, that's a social worker talking to the youth through rhyme. He's saying the future's all in your hands, so of yourself, yeah, you should be demanding. We're all responsible for whatever outcome. That's why I speak over beats for my income. He's trying to get young people to make wiser decisions with their lives and not always say, I'm doing this because someone else did this to me. And so those are the types of things that I introduce students to. But I want to show you this image, right? What comes to mind when you see this? What'd you say? Barb. Barb, Nicki Minaj. Okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts come to mind that you're able to say out loud? Exploitation. Extinction. Somebody said ratchet. Say that again. Strong black, and I couldn't hear the last word. Queens, strong black queens. All right, so let's take all of this and let's unpack this because honestly, I think you see a little bit of all of this there. There is this great article that I read recently. It's called The Bad Bitch Barbie Craze and Beyonce. And in this article, written by Dr. Krista LaVoule and Tisha Lewis Ellison, they unpack this whole commodification of the black female body. And they contextualize it in history, going back and showing how black women were portrayed. And they assert that some of what you see now is not victimization, but it's folks making a decision that, hey, if this is what the public wants, I'm going to capitalize on it, and I am going to become the commodity. If you are going to do this, you're going to do it on my terms, right? And so, thankfully, Dr. LaVoule is here today. Give it up for Dr. Krista LaVoule. Because I think it's important that, particularly when you're speaking on the black female experience as it relates to hip hop, that we hear from a person who is grounded in that work and can speak to that. So Dr. LaVoule, would you do me a favor? Would you come up and just kind of speak to what this article is about? Because they're probably going to go and get this PDF. But just would you come up and just say a few words about what the article entails? I hate to put you on the spot.
Good afternoon. I was just trying to put some lotion on my hand at the time. I don't think you can talk about hip hop and not talk about women. Being from Brooklyn, living in the Bronx during the time when hip hop I felt like was groundbreaking. Every time I write something, I always want to ask, well, where were women? You know, where were we? Most people think about hip hop and they think about misogyny. You cannot just ignore that. So I'm confrontational, so I wanted to confront it. So during the time when this was written, Beyonce's Lemonade came out. Anybody ever heard of that album? Okay, so there were, this whole special issues in Taboo was about connecting to Beyonce and what was happening. So now that this information came out about Jay-Z, I feel like I need to write something else. But speaking about this, it talks about the fact that black bodies were objectified. And it puts that out there. This is what happened, and it looks at it from a historical lens. And it also acknowledges that some people put their own bodies out there, that not all bodies that we see. And in the article, you'll see Cardi B, you'll see Beyonce, you'll see several other people, Nicki Minaj, that they made a decision to put themselves out there. But even in that decision, you have to talk about all of the people who didn't consciously make that decision and their bodies were put out there. And what does that mean? And do we ever really know how this half-naked person came to be? Was this a decision that was made? Was this something that was pressured? Did this person feel this was the only way to really position themselves in a certain way? And what does that mean for all of the young girls that's looking, upon these images? So the actual title came from a comment that someone said to me, "What's up with this bad bitch Barbie craze?" And I asked, "Well, what do you mean?" And it's basically saying that, remember, I'm in Atlanta. So Atlanta is known for a lot of things. Strip clubs is one of them. So what is that culture like? And what does that mean to young college students and women in the workforce and girls in 5th grade and so on and so forth? So it just really talks about questioning what we see when people sometimes present themselves and they have everything added on. I'll just let that resonate. Everything is an additive. Nothing were things that would normally be there, from the hair to the makeup to the nails, the lashes, their physical body, and what does that really mean? And does that put pressure on other people? And what does that look like in the classroom, and so on and so forth? So this whole article is really examining that and questioning what that looks like and how that trickles down from just what we see on television to what we actually see in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. LeBoux. So I want to advance a little bit and just kind of tell you about some of the partnerships that have emerged out of the Hip Hop Literacy Lab. How are we doing on time, Doctor? We're good? Okay, so I knew that I couldn't do this alone, and so you saw the partnership with Nappy Roots. But a while ago, I was able to make another partnership with a gentleman who lives right here. He lives in New Jersey, Union, New Jersey, Master Ace. And Master Ace was a member of one of the original crews in hip hop, the Juice Crew. And the Juice Crew consisted of, here's Master Ace on the left. In the back with a little black hat on is Big Daddy Kane. In the front with a white and blue shirt stripes on, that's Craig G, who actually lived in the same neighborhood with Dr. LeVoux, right? And then you have MC Shan, Biz Markie, Kool G Rap, who's like one of the great storytellers. And so this was one of the original crews. Crew is important in hip hop. Crew is important. Everybody had their own styles, but you had your crew and your crew had your back, right? So I reached out to Master Ace and I told him what we were doing with the Hip Hop Literacy Lab. And there's a specific reason I reached out to Master Ace. Number one, his lyrics have very few curse words in them. He's able to convey his ideas in a very creative way without dropping a lot of vulgar language. That's a talent, that's a skill. You don't need to say all of these things this way to get your point across. That's number one. But number two, Master Ace has a degree in marketing. He went to University of Connecticut, and what's that? That's right, that's right. His mother said, you are going to get this degree, and all the rap stuff can come later. And he ended up at the school, he won a contest He won a rap contest, a talent show, and the prize was to get a recording session with Marley Marl, who's right there in the blue and white striped shirt on the far right. So he finishes school, he has his degree, and now he's going to cash in his prize, which is a recording contract. And at this point, he's been a rapper for 35 years. 35 years. But he said, listen, I'll partner with you, and what you can do, we can write these lessons around my lyrics. And so I took his catalog, and we developed over 80 lessons and activities for students around his catalog. And what I love about his catalog, he does these critiques of America. He does critiques of his life and his choices. And here's one that really sticks out to me. But before I play it, you know, we call this unpacking the lesson. If you notice, I have some words in bold, right? So one of the first things, if this ain't home, then where can it be? He's asking himself, America is all I know. If this is not home, then where is home for me as an African American? He also says, oh, say, can you see? That's an allusion to what? Star Spangled Banner, right? And then you see, because we all look guilty in them tenements. He grew up in the projects, and he understands that you are guilty until proven innocent. And then he mentions Khalif Browder. A lot of students don't know who Khalif Browder was, but here's the thing. Hip-hop has always been about these planting of seeds. When we would hear things on the radio, books mentioned, people mentioned, it would lead us to go do research, and this was before internet. And you try to go find out who is this person they mentioned. And so you had the public library. You know, we didn't have Google at that point. So I want you to hear what Master A says in this song called American Me.
Yeah, it's hard to be the American me. If this ain't home, then where can I be? Answers no when they ask, or say, can you see? Especially when the lawyer asks, or hey, can you plead? I was born in the world without innocence. Cause we all look guilty in the tenements. Living life on the edge and it's been intense. The hands of hate plan I think maybe what it sense. Graduated and my bonds couldn't be prouder. And my soul is the spirit of Khalif Browder. And that was 35 years back. When the song cried, couldn't hold the tears back. The promised land, tell me where it's at. I've been alive 51, been the same amount of years black. Still I'ma write these bars in the land of these stripes and stars. Let's talk about it. How the dawn's every light, trying to survive.
Just last week, I was talking with my students about how does a writer's perspective shape what they write when they're writing a first-person narrative. That's what you have here. He's sharing his perspective through a first-person narrative, and how does his experience as an American growing up in Brooklyn shape what he has to say about being the American me? This is the work that we're doing in the Hip Hop Literacy Lab, and I want to bring you to the present. This is where we are right now. The Hip Hop Literacy Lab is now in a different space. It's in a different space. This is my classroom. I took this picture maybe a month ago. And if you notice, if you look really far in the back, you can see KRS-One. His picture is there. He's got the books around him. And I say, hey, we're completing. They come in and the assignments on the board, and a lot of it is very highly student-centered, student-driven. These are our class rules. Respect works. And if you look at the rules, respect the culture. Honor the diversity in our classroom by showing respect for different ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives. Hip-hop teaches us to value individuality. Look at the last one, embrace authenticity. Keep it real. Always be true to yourself in your learning journey. Embrace mistakes as part of growth and stay committed to improving your literacy skills every day. And this is a second set of rules there. Speak thoughtfully, drop the mic respectfully, listen when others are speaking, and give them the spotlight. Every voice in this room matters, and we grow stronger when we hear each other out. Even the class rules are grounded in hip-hop culture. Even the class rules are grounded in hip-hop culture. And this is a poster that's in the classroom, but we go over this every week. We have a morning meeting every morning, and there are little quotes and notes around the room. But this is a quote that I found that really speaks to what needs to happen in public education. Great innovation only happens when people aren't afraid to do things differently. See, our classrooms and our schools have become prisoners to how we've always done things. We've never done it this way. that's what's holding us back. So we need folks who are willing to just step outside of the box and try some things differently. I was in DC a few years ago at the National Council for Social Studies, and the speaker was Dr. Jeffrey Canada, who is the founder of the Harlem Children's Zone. And he said, you know, schools aren't like a bottle of wine. Like, this was a very good year, you know? Schools are either great schools or they have a perpetual history of being troubled schools until we decide to do something totally different. And what I notice as a principal is a lot of times districts want to scapegoat issues. And they want to say, it's that leader, let me change the leader, or it's this teacher, let me change the teacher, when those are folks who are plugged into a larger system. It's a larger system. So if the toe is infected and we just trim the nail, the toe is still infected. The foot is still infected. And I think we just need to look at things from a different perspective. These are my current students. Some of them, they were at recess. I said, come over here, let's take a photo. And so, look at those faces. Look at those faces. I mean, I love these kids. And these kids are kids, you know, they make mistakes, they're trying, but they are learning about each other. They're from all parts of the world. And it's just a joy to be back in that space with them every single day as their teacher. Now, in this image, school is over, and I have chosen my role in the afternoon with dismissal. Kids who are waiting on their buses, they come to my room. And I'm asking kids, where are your parents from? Where are your parents from? This kid's showing me the city in Mexico his family is from. This other kid is showing me where Cameroon is. His family's from Cameroon. They're learning about themselves. They're sharing it with each other. We just have a lot of rich experiences like that. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful space to be in. When I was speaking here this summer, I told the group that I would not be returning as a principal. I was leaving that role after 7 years, and I was going back to my first love, and that was teaching. And everyone was like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Not here. Back home, folks were like, why would you leave a principalship? I was spending most of my day, 90% of my day, problem solving. Something happened on the bus. Something happened in the cafeteria. I paid $5 for the field trip, and I want my money back. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up to be an educator to work with children. And that's what I'm going to go back to. And I've been in education 24 years, and I want to end it in a space where I feel like I'm making a big difference and making an impact and helping young people become better people. And that is why I'm doing the Literacy Laboratory. And I'm honored to be able to share that with you. That is my story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mountain. Absolutely such an enriching and enlightening presentation, I think, for all of us. One of the things, and we'll open it up for Q&A, one of the things that just sort of comes to mind, one of the big things that come to mind during this awesome presentation is our own alumni here in Old Westbury. So, maybe they didn't graduate, but Kumo D attended SUNY Old Westbury, and he was in the Media and Communications Department, and we had a 50-year commemorative program here for hip hop, and we invited some artists back. Kumo D, I think Melly Mel, and some other artists were there. So just a sort of local Old Westbury history. And you spoke to so much, I think, not just for prospective teachers and those who are majoring in education, but I think your presentation speaks to so many disciplines, and just sort of across the disciplinary spectrum, and is so relevant for today. And I appreciate, as a historian, how you provide really sound historical context, which is sometimes often not entirely accessible today with different cultural expressions that are in front of us. We often don't get the context. So in the Old Westbury way, let's give him another round of applause. Jermaine or Reynard, how should we do the Q&A? You have a mic? Okay.
So he has one on that side.
Okay, got it. So if you have a question, just Tell us your name too, and maybe what department you're in.
My name is Jermaine. I'm a senior in the media communications department. I really love your work. I think it's very revolutionary, wanting to teach the youth and offer some representation for them. I just wanted to ask you, what kind of songs are you like playing around them? I was curious.
You say what kind of songs are we playing?
Not what kind of songs, but like what songs are you playing them, like specifically?
All right, I'll give you a short list of some of the things. One of the songs that I really love to integrate is A Children's Story by Slick Rick. It's a great, in terms of chronological order, transitions, and just him telling a story, from first person perspective. Another one is Everything is Everything by Lauryn Hill. That's a good one to include. You heard You Must Learn, Street Ministry by Gangstar. It's like you have to really go through and listen to all of the song and make sure you're not introducing anything that's gonna be negative, a negative influence, You don't wanna just pick a song, because of the first couple of lines, because the last couple of lines might derail the rest of your day. You'll be answering questions the next day. But yeah, there's a certain group of songs, and that's why I chose to work with Master Ace, because his catalog was filled with a lot of really rich gems that were safe for me as an educator and safe for my children. For instance, he has a song called Plant-Based, where he talks about making the decision to change his diet. And so that's something that can have a positive impact on a kid, just hearing someone take a stance on that simple part of your life of what you choose to eat.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The gentleman here has a question.
I guess I have a couple of questions. Sure. How many years have you had this in effect?
The Hip Hop Literacy Lab, this is probably going into the third year. So 2 years at Marbury Traditional Theme School, and then my first year at this current school, Alcova Elementary. So about 3 years.
Okay, so you're starting to implement this in other areas of the district?
Yes.
As well. Have you seen any success impact for students as a result?
Can I show you something? I want to show you something. Let me show you a little bit of the success. I thought I put it in here, but let me pull that up. So recently our students took an iReady test, mid-year diagnostic, and I had students that had up to 455% growth from August to December. At other students, 413, 213% growth. These are kids who transcended 2, 3, 4 grade levels in a matter of months in terms of their reading ability. And this has implications for all subject areas. If your ability to read goes up, that's going to impact how you do in social studies, science, mathematics, word problems, everything. And so what it is, it's about putting the right literature in front of them, celebrating incremental gains, and also partnering with parents and saying, hey, we really need to carve out 35, 40 minutes of reading each night. Priority sometimes can be a challenge because folks will spend a lot of time at sports events and practice and all of that, and those things can undermine you trying to help this child who's 3 or 4 grade levels behind because you're running up and down the soccer field or football, because you have these aspirations as a parent because you wanted to do those things or you had a stellar academic career. And just trying to really work with the parents and let's get our priorities in order. Let's turn this technology off, let's limit screen time, and let's really get these reading levels up. These numbers, I put this on a poster outside my classroom, and I got some side eyes from my colleagues, but I was so proud of my students, I didn't care. And I'm playing, they're not like us, it's blasting, because we're celebrating, But I hope every class can have this kind of success. And I'm looking at where you're gonna be at the end of the year, in May. This is how I knew I'm where I'm supposed to be right now when I saw these numbers. Yes, sir.
Dr. Mountain, I'm Bradley Young, student in Dr. Archer's class. So I gotta ask you, what do you love the most about being an educator? Because when I'm at home, I work with kids myself, and I love, working with them, being around them. So what do you love most about being an educator?
Oh man, I love their authenticity. I love their authenticity. You get what you get, from them. They are who they are. And something happens along the way, and as people get older, they start to hide layers of themselves. But I love that these 10-year-olds are who they are, and they're becoming human beings based on our feedback, our interactions with them, and they look at how we model, what we do. They're learning even when we're not talking. And speaking of that, like even this jacket, there are things on this jacket that lead to good conversations. What's this? What does that mean? The curriculum is everything. The curriculum is your bracelet. The curriculum is your shoes. The curriculum is a piece of art that's on the wall. I have a big Basquiat crown on the wall. I also have that crown on this pen here. But there's a meaning behind that. There's a reason that he used that image, that crown, and that leads to a discussion. But sometimes I plant the seed so I can have the discussion. I wore a shirt that had all these civil rights activists mugshots. I knew what was going to happen when I wore that. Who is that? I'm glad you asked. This is John Lewis, and sometimes you break the law for a good reason. These folks did a sit-in, blah, blah, blah. It led to a discussion. Was that in the curriculum or the lesson that day? No, but I had the curriculum right here on my shirt, and it led to that discussion. So I love their authenticity. I love their curiosity. I love that too. They ask those questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how are you? My name
Good.
is Trisha. I'm a biology student, but this is kind of like a personal question. Maybe you asked it before I came in a little bit late. When did you fall in love with hip-hop?
Oh, man, that's the question right there. When did I fall in love with hip-hop? My mother was getting her hair done. The year was probably 1983, 84, and I had to wait in the living room of this family and while she was getting her hair done, the Bright family, and they had a son my age, and he had all these tapes, and I didn't have any tapes. And he said, well, you can have this one. My brother had a tape player. The tape he gave me was Run DMC's King of Rock. And I took that tape home and I played that tape over and over. I let the tape pop. I said, what is that? I let the tape rock till the tape popped. And so my first real piece of music that I owned was King of Rock by Run DMC. And I just fell in love with the music, the storytelling, and then Yo MTV Raps were there, the visuals that went along with that. They were wearing these derbies, and they just looked so cool. That's when I fell in love with hip hop. And I was growing up in the South, but Run DMC was global, right? And so I loved it. I loved it, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of it in some way. So like most kids, as a teenager, I was writing rhymes, and I was rapping in the cafeteria and all of that. But I think what I'm doing now is I still am connected to the culture, but in a way that works in service of others, whether it's in service of folks in higher ed, or folks in the classroom with me, and even fellow teachers come to my classroom and ask questions, and I love sharing with them. I'm a teacher at heart,
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a literacy educator here. So I absolutely agree things have to be done differently to get some different results. What is your advice to a newer teacher who's afraid to try something different? I have some students here who are, entering into student teaching shortly. What's your advice to them?
My advice to them, you have to be really particular about who you choose to work for. That's one piece of advice. Don't just take a job. Make sure that your values and your vision for education somewhat aligns with the person you're working for, because the misstep that a lot of people make is they work for folks who are so data-driven that they lose sight of people. All they see is numbers. And I wrote this book years ago called The Brilliance Beneath, how America has a preoccupation with labeling schools, failing school, passing school, failing school, passing, and we lose sight of the brilliance beneath all of that. There are people in there doing great work. Kids may not test well, or there may be some other issue with the resources. It's other factors. Kids may be going through stress at home, social issues, whatever. I told my students just last week when my parents were going through a divorce, my grades went from all A's to all F's, because the least of my worries was what was going on at school and a worksheet. Because I'm worried about am I gonna have to move away from my friends, or my mom and dad are gonna be arguing tonight? So we gotta unpack what's going on with our kids, and it's not always about a test or a teacher who didn't do this or that. So my answer to you is, a pre-service teacher, I would say, hey, when you go out there to get a job, really interview them as well. Don't just let them interview you and sign on the dotted line, but visit lots of places and look at their website, look at their social media, and make sure that you're a right fit. Make sure that you're the right fit for that school. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to see that I'm also a teacher educator in English education, and so my students are becoming 7th through 12th grade ELA teachers. Thank you so much for your work. This is really
Thank you.
a lot of the students in my courses will pair hip hop with teaching poetry, and I see like a lot of those lessons come out of the work that we do together. But I know there's so much more based on your work that we could be doing, and so I just wanted to ask what your favorite interdisciplinary project is that you do with hip hop literacy.
Wow, that's a good one. So I had a chance to partner with artist Justin Bua, and Justin Bua is the visual artist who does a lot of the work that's on my materials. And what I noticed is that his work lends itself to students being able to write stories about his images. Anybody familiar with Justin Bua's work? Justin Bua? Well, Justin Bua is probably one of the most popular hip hop artists. He has a very famous image called the DJ. I'm sure you've seen it. His style is very distinctive. Let me see if I can show you something. I don't know if I can pull it up. All right, this is Justin Bua, and this is some of his work here. Very distinctive. So Justin and I put together a workbook, and the workbook was about narratives, helping students write narratives, and we present them with passages alongside his images, but sometimes we would just present the image and say, hey, write a story that goes along with this. And then there was a rubric. Your story should contain these things. Introduce the characters, introduce the setting, all of the things that students are asked to do in the curriculum. But a lot of think about when we were in school, they just give you a writing passage. Think about a gift you received, blah, 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 get to work. You got 20 minutes. Our kids are visual. Think about it. They're on devices all the time. They're used to seeing an image. And this photo elicitation, some of Dr. LeBoul's work dealt with photo elicitation, where she would show an image and ask the person, hey, what does this make you think of? What comes to mind here? Taking that and putting it in the classroom to help our kids become better writers is one way where you're not confined to just using poetry. Yeah, and so all of his work deals in some way with the culture. Like, here's a breakdancing competition. Here's somebody breakdancing. It's a piano man. These guys are playing basketball. He grew up right here in the Bronx, So he's always looking for how can his work reach a broader audience. And so I offered him the opportunity to have his work be in front of children. These are all great questions. These are all great questions.
Any more questions, or we're good? Yes, Dr. LeBoul.
Do you have any original work of your own?
Original work of my own, yes.
Songs or?
I do. I have some songs. I may share something with you. Do you mind if I share something with them? Okay, years ago, when I was living here in Jersey City, a cousin of mine had a recording studio. So I would go there and I would record music from time to time. And I was working on a project. It never came out. And then shortly after 9/11, I moved to Georgia and became a first grade teacher. And then I did that for 1 year, and I came to the realization that I did not belong in the first grade classroom. So I went to 4th grade the next year. That's right. So I positioned myself in the right space, a better space, because those 6-year-olds were everywhere. And I was like, I cannot do this. So one of the first standards I had to teach in social studies was about what inventions changed the course of American history. Students were supposed to come up with an essay about what inventions changed society, whether it was the radio, the typewriter, television, or whatever. So I ended up doing the activity with them, but I recorded a song about it. Would you like to hear it? Here you go. All right, let's see if I can find it. Television.
This box that they watch was the new invention. It could steal your mind and captivate your attention. And oh yeah, I can't forget to mention how it would change the way the world would perceive black folks rapping and telling jokes. From BET to CBS, it changed the way we looked and the way we dressed. A far cry from the early days of radio shows, from the Roosevelt era, you know, early America. One in every household, and then it went to two. Now we got them in the cars and in the classrooms too. And this one black box can control your soul. A million minds at the mercy of remote control. It's hard to believe because it's too much to handle. Satellite dishes outside, 5 channels. The kids used to ride bikes and play in the streets. Now they watch the box non-stop with food in their teeth. Then we televise solutions to obesity. Turn the box on, turn your mind on so you can see. Wives watch the box when they trying to cope. Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Phil, there's still no hope. And life without the box is what no one knows. And so they tune in and tune out and watch the shows. Reprogramming your brainwaves, so we remain slaves to Target and Walmart. It's time that we all start to unplug and examine our own routines. Spend hours in the book and not in front of a flat screen, building the brain cells and neuron pathways. We can't advance the species watching these TVs.
All right, there's quite a bit there, right? Thank you. So in short, what I said, I know it went kind of fast. I said this box that they watched was a new invention. It could steal your mind and captivate your attention. And oh yeah, I can't forget to mention how it would change the way the world would perceive black folks rapping and telling jokes from BET to CBS. That's a double entendre. From BET to CBS or CBS. You get it? It changed the way we looked and the way we dressed, a far cry from the early days of radio shows from the Roosevelt era, you know, early America. One in every household, and then it went to two. Now we got them in the cars and in the classrooms too. And this one black box can control your soul, a million minds at the mercy of remote control. So I unpacked that with my students and said, look, this is how I'm doing the activity I want you to do. Write about an invention. I just chose to make mine rhyme. But what invention changed our lives, for the good or for the bad? So I hope that answers your question, Dr. LeVoux. All right.
I think that's an awesome note for us to conclude on. Thank you so much, Dr. Mountain, Dr. Shukram, Seji, and all of you for attending. I want to say particularly to my senior seminar students, because we're having this event at the hour of our class time. This is the last time we're going to see them. They were depositing their papers. What you spoke, and I think that they would agree, you can agree by just nodding your head, you spoke to so many things that we've covered over the arc of the semester. And so thank you, and thank you students, everybody in attendance. Wish you all a wonderful break. I'm excited to read these papers. Yeah. But thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.